Chapter 2. The Wealthy and the Deranged. "So I was thinking," began Lux, following close behind Violina. "Why didn't we just blow up the wall at the bottom of these tunnels and use that as our entrance? It would have been a lot faster. The explosion would have attracted a fair bit of attention to us, and they would have had plenty of time to block our escape." Lux nodded, apparently satisfied with this answer. "Okay, good, just as long as we didn't make it all crazy elaborate for the sake of you getting to rappel down a cliff." "Of course not," Violina laughed. "That part was just a happy synchronicity." Taking a sharp turn in the tunnel, Violina noticed something unnatural etched into the wall. It was an X enveloped on its left and bottom sides by an L shape, the emblem of Xaw. Lux's eyes widened. "Well, that's unnerving. What would Xaw's emblem be doing in here? What is this place anyway?" "It's a network of mine shafts. Here, get a look at this thing." Violina set the sack with the hatchlings down and tugged on a contraption protruding from the dirt. With some effort, it pulled free. "Some sort of mining tool?" Lux ran her fingers along its edges. "It looks so high-tech and yet so, what's a good word, artistic? Sleek? I mean, it's old and encrusted with dirt, but it's beautiful. Maybe it's worth something." "Onyx and glass, just like the artifacts in the museum. Not sure why the emblem of Xaw would be here, though. He lived 500 years ago, and this is way more advanced than what was available during the Dark Ages, or even today for that matter." "Ah, abandoned mine shafts." Lux patted the rock wall as if it were a baby panda. "If I had a mine shaft, I don't think I could ever abandon it. I mean, there's just got to be a better way." Violina spotted a half-buried skull. Also curious. She cleared away some dirt, revealing neck and shoulder bones. "This ground sure is soft compared to the stone of the roof and the walls. It's as if the dirt washed in from outside. I wonder how he died. It must have been sudden." Violina resumed her climb. "Well, it's a mystery we can solve later, perhaps after we retire. Let's just get to our lair and decide what to do with these killer fluff balls. You know, I always found archaeology fascinating. It'd probably be my career choice number 3, right behind veterinarian. But come to think of it, if I did that, my career would literally lie in ruins." Lux showed no sign of letting up on the puns. They continued to trudge up the mine shaft, their energy waning as it became ever steeper. In time, however, they reached the light filtering in from the exit. Lux pushed aside the scraps of wood and rock Violina had used to camouflage the opening. "Finally!" she coughed, receiving a puff of dust to the face. Violina stepped into the sunlight and scanned the landscape. Nothing but lush, river-strewn countryside in all directions. No one in sight. "Ah, the suns are so bright!" Violina folded her arms. "So we just infiltrated a low to moderate security laboratory, stole a trio of killing machines of fluffy doom, and blew a crater into their fine establishment, but the bright light is your first complaint? You are a fascinating specimen." "Yes, well, it rhymed, so it had to be said." Lux tossed her silky hair over her shoulder and began walking down the hillside. "On a more serious note, I'm trying to think of some potential buyers who will take both of the Drycodon." "Both?" asked Violina. "Don't you mean all 3? Well, we have to keep one of them as a pet, naturally." Lux spoke as if Violina had asked a silly question. Violina had to put her foot down. "We are not keeping one, Lux. You do this every time, and then something bad happens and you come to your senses. If you want a pet, fine, we'll get you a puppy, but we can't have an illegal, bloodthirsty, prehistoric monster as a pet." Lux gave Violina a tragic look. Then, with exaggerated drama in her voice, said, "Go ahead, crush my dreams," and stormed off with the occasional sniff. Violina knew she would be over it within 5 minutes tops. Traveling alongside the mountains and over rolling hills, the girls finally arrived back at their lair. It was really more of a bungalow, but Violina insisted on calling it a lair because lairs carry with them an element of majesty. Once they had the platinum, they could make it fit the name more aptly. Violina lived in the countryside, away from Eden, ever since her father's funeral. To both her and Lux's disappointment, he did not choose a better life. Instead, he continued his parasitic habits until he racked a gambling debt so high, the man whom he owed took his life as payment. The obituaries called him a victim, but Violina knew better. Dozens of friends and associates attended his funeral, mourning as people generally do at such an event, But then came the time for Violina, his only daughter, to give the eulogy. She was allotted a full 30 minutes, but finished in 10 seconds flat. This box contains the rotting remains of a man who never met anyone he didn't lie to, cheat, steal from, or kill. Instead of allowing the casket to be lowered slowly into the grave, Violina cut the ropes, slamming it to the bottom with a resonant crash. Ever since that day, Lux too had become bitter about the state of the world and left with Violina to make a new life. The suns had long set when the girls got the hatchlings situated in their inventory room. It was there that the various animals they had captured were fed and safely locked up until Violina and Lux could decide what to do with them. On the other side of the hall sat a second room filled with animals, but for a very different purpose. The specially designated pet room, where most of their less bloodthirsty inventory tended to end up. Lux would often smuggle creatures from the inventory room into the pet room for various temporary reasons, whether it be for space, medical help, or as had happened only a week prior, a raccoon. Looked like he wanted to make new friends, and Lux insisted that she not be the one standing between him and his social life. Naturally, somehow all those animals with short-term issues magically became long-term pets. With this in mind, Violina made a note to keep a close eye on the baby Drycodon. As the girls took care of their nightly feeding and cleaning duties, Violina posed a potentially dangerous question. So, exactly how many pets are we planning on accumulating before we reach our cap? Lux pursed her lips. Well, I suppose we can stop when we run out of space. Violina tried to word her next sentence delicately. Isn't that, what you said last time? And then when we ran out of space, Lux looked sheepish. Is this about the time I knocked out the wall between the pet room and the living room to create Petopia? Petopia was the name Lux lovingly gave the 35-star resort she had created to make room for more animals. Violina stood her ground. Look, all I'm trying to say is that the phrase, "till we run out of space," doesn't actually answer my question very well, you see? Lux's eyes had glossed over, a common occurrence whenever Violina brought up this topic. But if I hadn't done that, we wouldn't have our fish named Fish, Dr. Fluffycakes, Venom, the Chicken, and Professor Schmidt. And wouldn't that just be tragic? Well, yes, but technically you've had those pets since before I knew you, so your little wall-crushing adventure didn't actually affect them, replied Violina. At the very least, how about next time you decide to expand the pet room, we at least talk about it before you take a sledgehammer to something, okay? With the pet debate settled for at least a day or two, now came the step of finding a buyer for the Drycodon. Never had the girls possessed contraband so rare and so valuable, well worthy of careful evaluation. Even discussing it with the wrong people could get them turned over to the enforcers, or worse. Though less than pleasant, the risks associated with the black market came bundled with lucrative prices. Shall we visit the usual venues tomorrow? Proposed Violina. Perhaps we should try the casino. She found it sad just how many people visited casinos in hopes of scoring big. If people had even an ounce of sense in their brains, they would focus their efforts just about anywhere else. She couldn't blame the casino owners, however. For them, it was an absurdly profitable endeavor. Still, there was something about taking advantage of the stupid that didn't quite sit right for her. Before Lux could answer, ear-splitting screeches erupted from the hallway. She hopped out of her chair and skipped delightedly down the hall. Sounds like the drugs have worn off! Violina corrected her. Sounds like the gates of hell just opened. I can't wait to get rid of those little monsters. Violina! An indignant Lux exclaimed. We have the rarest animal species known to man in our home. How about some appreciation? Oh, I'm appreciative. I'll be even more appreciative when they're tranquilized, sold, and fulfill my dreams of early retirement. And it's a lair, Lux. How many times do I have to tell you? When it looks like a lair, I will call it a lair, snapped Lux as she picked up her tranquilizing gun. Violina pulled the inventory room door open and was met with a staggering sight. The Drycodons somehow escaped their cage and were eating the other animals. In horrified fascination, the girls watched as the demons devoured all of their hard work. Lux, shoot them! She did so, firing 3 darts in quick succession. One by one, the Drycodon collapsed. Well then, began Violina matter-of-factly, it would appear we'll have to keep them sedated for the remainder of their stay. Lux couldn't seem to take her eyes off the carnage and slumbering monsters. Yes, so after further contemplation on the matter, I've decided that I would, in fact, prefer a puppy to a Drycode. You don't say. It's a good thing these Drycaden are worth so much, because we just lost a good portion of our life savings. Can you give me a hand cleaning this up? Ha, I'll pass, declared Lux with sassiness in her voice that Violina seldom heard. It was never a good sign. You'll pass? Yes, you're on your own this time. Remember how the inventory room and disassembly room used to be one and the same? You insisted that it saved space. I was the only one who cared enough about these poor creatures to clean up after their friends' guts had been splattered everywhere. Now it's your turn. You see this mess, Violina? This is why we need an inventory room and a disassembly room. All right. You've made your point. It was no use arguing with Lux this late at night. She would just get too tired and all logic would be unceremoniously thrown out the window. Violina dragged the Drycaden back to their cage and started cleaning up the carcasses and blood. It was going to be a long night. After sleeping in later than intended the following morning, Violina and Lux began identifying buyers that frequented the casino. After eliminating names from a list of prospects, however, there was only one man they felt confident about: Jimmy Rex. Though both a scoundrel and a moron, it was common knowledge that he was a collector of rarities. Lux even went so far as to write his name in extra slanty italics, as she insisted regular italics didn't communicate the importance well enough. With the arrival of nightfall, the girls departed the lair, mentally preparing for a night of manipulation and negotiation. Another two skills that produced vastly better results when utilized together. The casino was on the other side of the canyon beyond the cliffs that encircled Eden, but its distance did not hinder its popularity. Tall, bright, and obnoxious, it stood as a monument to the gluttony, greed, and irrationality sanctified by the populace. Lux eyed the giant double doors with disdain. I can't believe how crazy some people are and what they're willing to do just for money. I know, right? Replied Violina facetiously. Why can't they just liberate some formerly extinct animals and earn a living like us and the rest of the normal people? They all look so miserable, too. I mean, ever since Professor Schmidt was a puppy, anytime he found a stick, he looked like the happiest creature in the world. Why is it that people never seem to be content despite having so much more? Depends on your mindset, replied Violina. I'd say the vast majority of people are only satisfied when they've got shinier toys than their neighbors. Well, that's certainly not us. People in Eden can ride their platinum-plated yachts down to the canals for all I care. Just give me the means to live life away from all the craziness in the world and I'm beyond happy. I'm in the exact same boat, agreed Violina. Wait, did you just make a yacht pun? That's great, I'm slowly corrupting you. Lux looked like she might burst from delight. Though going back to Professor Schmidt for a sec, this one time I was sitting with him by a bonfire I built, and he didn't seem to be enjoying himself. Then I realized that in his mind, I was burning a giant pile of toys. I still feel kind of bad about that. Entering the casino, Violina was overwhelmed by the stench of alcohol and sweat. Instantly, she was reminded why she preferred to avoid public places and even people in general, like the plague. In fact, some of them might actually have the plague for all she knew. Not even 5 seconds inside, and the girls were already receiving catcalls. Though annoying, there was an element of entertainment that came with being around men as pathetic as these. Sometimes Violina would tell people exactly why she didn't like them. It's noble, she explained to Lux. I tell them what's wrong with them. It's what doctors do with their patients, but I do it free of charge. That's doubly noble. A graying man, taken off guard by the girls, recited a terrible on-the-spot poem involving flowers and how Lux's eyes were like the deepest blue oceans. He then swooned drunkenly and stumbled, but Lux was ready. She sidestepped, and instead of falling adoringly into her, the man toppled onto the solid granite tile. The girls then stepped over him in their heels and continued on their way as if nothing had happened. So much for staying low profile, whispered Violina. Yes, well, we never really expected otherwise in that regard, now did we? Replied Lux nonchalantly. I never understood poetry. It's just telling a girl she's attractive in the fanciest nature-related words one can think of. Lux nodded as if she knew all too well. Ogling eyes continued to follow the girls as they maneuvered their way through the crowd. Finally, they turned a corner leading to a back room reserved for the most dedicated gamblers with heavier wallets. Violina scanned the vicinity. Besides noting the nearest exits should trouble arise, a young woman in a black silken dress staring intently at the ceiling, for no apparent reason, caught her eye. There was something unnatural about her ivory skin and radiating violet eyes. The sight sent chills crawling down Violina's spine, but she shook it off. In the center of a cluster of men sat Jimmy Rex, the potential whom they were looking for. Violina nudged Lux with her elbow and nodded in his direction. Lux narrowed her eyes and put her game face on. Seating herself, Violina threw down some chips. Up for another round?
Well, of course. I believe I could oblige for a pretty lady such as yourself.
Jimmy gave a wink that made Violina want to vomit. His hands were covered in scars, a permanent trophy from his frequent bets that he could hold his hand in a fire longer than any of his friends. His constant winning only made him an even greater loser in her eyes. Perfect, I'll deal, said Violina with feigned enthusiasm.
They say money can't buy love, but I swear when I get the money for my yacht, women will be lining up with their applications.
Though she despised the activity, Violina was a competent gambler. When she had Lux by her side, they rarely lost. Perhaps it was because they had vast experience dealing with people trying to take advantage of them in one way or another, but the girls always seemed to see straight through their opponents' facades. With cards dealt, Violina attempted to steer the conversation towards the Drykadon. So, did you guys hear about what happened at the museum? Jimmy roared with obnoxious laughter as he tossed several more chips onto the pile.
Who hasn't? The press has all been milking that story harder than a goat that lactates liquid platinum. What was the museum even thinking? Trying to cover up the fact that they stole their own animals so they wouldn't have to give them up to the lawmakers? Real hilarious.
One of the other men spoke up.
Doesn't make a lot of sense, though. It's not like they'll be able to put them back on display or anything.
Jimmy extinguished his cigar on a nearby ashtray.
Basically, all they can do is try to sell them. But who in the right mind would buy those critters? Couldn't pay me enough to take that risk. Ain't worth it. Might be the last thing I'd do as a free man.
The men around the table nodded their heads in agreement. Violina's frustration at the lack of opportunity abruptly turned to shock when a hostile voice barked from behind her.
You there! You're under arrest for theft!
An enforcer was approaching the table. Lux's eyes darted from Violina to the enforcer and back again. To Violina's surprise, Jimmy spoke up.
Now you listen here. Do you even know who I am?
Without a word, the enforcer chained Jimmy's wrists together and led him out of the room amidst his protests. A silence ensued and everyone at the table exchanged awkward glances. Relieved that they had not come for her, Violina exhaled slowly, trying not to look suspicious. Well, I suppose that concludes our game. She collected her chips and left the table, Lux following close behind. What do we do now? Asked Lux, unable to conceal her worry. He was our best chance, and even if he hadn't just gotten arrested, there's no way he would have bought the Drykadon anyway. I'm starting to have a hard time believing anyone will want. An airy alto voice interrupted from behind them. You are not a Venic. Curious. Lux and Violina turned around and saw the beautiful yet inhuman young woman standing uncomfortably close to them. Her skin emanated a faint glow. Violina couldn't help but just stare in silence. Oh yes, pleasantries. The young woman sounded as if she had more than one voice box, adding a haunting echo to her words. He demanded that I perform pleasantries. Pleasantries, pleasantries. But not too many pleasantries. Hello. Yes, hello to you too, replied Lux, her voice trailing off. You stated that you possess Drykadon? Slender, vein-like tubes ran down the young woman's neck, radiating a deep violet that matched a streak to her otherwise ebony hair. Violina decided she would take a gamble. Yes, is that something you would be interested in? Sorry, what was your name? He called me Vexia. She stared blankly into space, but then her eyes came back into focus and locked onto Violina. And yes, I would be delighted. I've always loved Drykadon so. But no matter what I did, they never loved me. Why? Vexia screamed, making Violina and Lux jump and provoking unwanted stares from around the room. I don't know the answer to that, Lux informed her. Vexia continued, totally calm as if her outburst had never happened. How much? How much? Enoch wouldn't want me to be stingy with such. She turned misty-eyed, reminiscent. Long live long. The Drykadon are back? But what does that mean? When something dies, it should stay dead, no? Slaughtered like cows they were, no matter how desperately they mooed, a gore-strewn symbol for the inevitable end estate of the condemned. But I would not stay dead, nor condemned. My dear sweet Enoch sought that privilege. My lovely grave. Am I denied it? It is denied me! She shrieked once more, her body convulsing. Violina was beyond unnerved now. Though desperate to get away, the hope of offloading the contraband outweighed her discomfort. So how much would you be willing to pay for 3 adorable Drycaden hatchlings? Asked Lux cautiously, clearly trying to avoid setting off the human crazy bomb. Vexia seemed to come back to reality and looked at Lux. She paused and then stated, 250,000 platinum seems fair. Do you not think so? I do. I have. I will. Violina's jaw almost dropped at such a ludicrously high offer, but she kept her composure. Very well, she said, concealing her excitement. With zero hesitation, Vexia wrote a platinum note for the complete sum and handed it over. They then agreed to meet back at the casino the next day for the delivery of the creatures. Vexia hummed at them. I find you to be pleasant enough. Unlike the others, here who dress in their frivolity and call it fashion. If you fail to arrive tomorrow, know that I will cause you harm. Goodbye now, goodbye and farewell. No, not too many. She abruptly shut off any further dialogue. Eager to be on her way, Violina did not need telling twice, let alone 3 times. The girls exited the casino and headed back to their lair, putting as much distance between themselves and Vexia as they could. That was so weird. Lux had a gift for stating the obvious. I know, what was with her saying Drycaden never loved her? You'd think she'd already had some as pets. A total nutcase, truly. So what's the plan? Violina drew the platinum note from her pocket. I guess the first step is to take this to the monetaries and see if it'll even clear. I have an uncomfortable hunch that this Vexy girl is too insane to really have that kind of money. Who spends that much on pets? Violina crossed her arms in silence. Fine, conceded Lux. I may be guilty of that sort of thing, but not to the tune of 250,000 platinum. That's absurd. Honestly, I would have been thrilled if she had offered 5,000. The girls decided they would worry about it in the morning, as the monetaries had closed for the day. After ensuring the Drycaden were fed some of the leftovers they had created the night before, they injected them with the sedative and went to bed. The night was a sleepless one for Violina. She didn't want to get her hopes up, but she may very well have been on the brink of the life she's always wanted. Her days of subjection to the parasites that made up mankind might soon end. She would live far away from Eden, peaceably, doing anything and everything as she pleased. Therein lay happiness after all. Early the next morning, the girls hustled out of the bungalow, eager to get to Eden the moment the monetary opened. Arriving with perfect timing, they walked in and handed the clerk their platinum note. His eyes narrowed in clear suspicion.
Now what's a couple of wenches doing with something like this? Stay here.
He then headed into one of the back offices. Violina waited with bated breath, her nerves in anticipation rising by the second. Lux was bobbing up and down on her toes, unable to contain herself. At last the clerk returned, looking astonished.
It cleared.
As the girls left the building, Violina restrained the urge to shout with elation, a feat that Lux absolutely failed to achieve. Let's go buy lair stuff, Lux exclaimed. After all these years, well, all 2 of them. Though ecstatic, reality set back in on Violina. They still needed to meet with Vexia once more. But why should this trouble her? Yes, Vexia was a mad woman, but they already had the platinum, and waiting to spend it would have no impact on tonight's rendezvous. She shoved her discomfort to the back of her mind. All right, we are hereby retired, announced Violina victoriously. Where do you want to go first? Zorman's, replied Lux, having obviously planned it all out long before now. They have everything there. She then started listing everything their lair needed to have. Naturally, we'll need to have secret passages, and trapdoors. Sheer joy coursed through her voice. Whoa, and why do we need all of that? It's a lair, Violina. Lux stomped her foot. We just do. Also, we need a good pacing area. What? Asked Violina, unsure she had heard correctly. You know, for plotting and stuff. Lux spoke as if this was perfectly normal. It's got to look nice, but not so nice to where it's distracting. I see, said Violina without blinking. I'll, look into that. Oh, and how about a moat? Proposed Lux. Done. Moats were fantastic. There was no arguing that. And an elevator? Why not? The fact that Violina was wealthy beyond belief was starting to sink in. As long as we get a giant vat of peach mango juice, I'm happy. Lux began counting on her fingers. A garden? A pool? Puppies? Let's get a dozen. Lux clapped her hands and led the way. My heavens, I am so happy I could kill someone. She then stopped in her tracks to correct herself. And by kill, I mean eat. And by someone, I mean a steak sandwich. Violina was leading the way towards the market center and enjoying blissful thoughts of her new life when they came across a giant banner. Our children are the future. Does that scare you as much as it scares me? Frightened stiff, answered Lux. I just hope we're on the other side of the world by the time that real craziness hits. Beneath the banner was a steel lockbox with a slot for monetary donations. Although Violina wasn't thrilled at the idea of giving charity via a lawmaker program, she nevertheless made a sizable contribution. Well, hopefully at least a portion of it finds its way past the sticky fingers of the administrators and postpones the end of the world by at least a week or two. A few hours later, they emerged with several carts of merchandise in tow. Without question, Violina's favorite purchase was the shiny new QX Steamer 2450, a classy but not overly extravagant steam vehicle that practically exuded majesty. Between that and the new weaponry, the new lair decor, and seeing Lux so thrilled, Violina's happiness was almost palpable. Well, shall we head back to our lair? Lux smiled as she said the word. Yes, but there's one more thing I want to do. Violina retrieved the gold and azure artifact from her thigh pack. I know we were planning on selling this, but seeing how platinum is no longer an issue, I want to fashion it onto a bracelet as a souvenir of our final venture. She pointed toward a lavish jewelry shop across the canal. With no objections from Lux, Violina soon returned donning a beautifully crafted bracelet. After an afternoon of delightedly digging through their purchases, the time came to deliver the contraband. Equipping their heist gear and weapons as a precaution, they loaded up the freshly sedated Drykadon and hopped into the QX Steamer 2450. Off to Vexia then, said Lux, igniting the engines. That we are. Violina kicked herself for agreeing to a combination of circumstances that was just begging for trouble. Meeting a lunatic alone, at night, in a dark alleyway behind an already sketchy casino. It was, of course, a bit too late to pick out another venue. Parking near the casino, the girls each took hold of a handle on the crate containing the Drykadon and made their way to the rendezvous point. As they approached, Violina could make out Vexia's silhouette and an oddly shaped lump on the ground. After a few more steps, she realized the lump was a dead body. Lux was horrified. What have you done? What have I done? Repeated Vexia, apparently unsure what Lux was talking about. Oh, that. Yes, I incapacitated him. He could have jeopardized our arrangement. Oh yes, pleasantries. You're welcome. Incapacitated? Shouted Violina in disbelief. He is clearly dead! Stabs of dread pierced her stomach as she realized the body was wearing an enforcer's uniform. My apologies. Allow me to clarify my earlier statement. I permanently incapacitated him. Now, set the merchandise in the trunk of my steamer over there. Pretty steamer. It was crafted especially for me. Enoch loved crafting. He loved many things. The Consecrator, the Pillar of God, the Wardens. Ignoring her nonsensical rambling in an effort to get this over with as soon as humanly possible, Lux and Violina moved the crate as Vexia instructed. Well, it's been nice working with you, said Lux, tremors running through her voice. Nice. Yes, you're right. Nice, nice, nice. Without warning, she shrieked for no apparent reason. A rugged voice sounded through the alleyway.
Officer Heller, is that you?
3 enforcers were coming their way. Violina turned to Vexia, but with the roar of an engine, she and her steamer had disappeared. Without missing a beat, the girl sprinted out of the back of the alleyway. While getting caught for most crimes involved arrest, trial, retrial, and hefty amounts of paperwork, killing an enforcer permitted immediate lethal repercussions. This cannot be happening, moaned Lux. I am not eager to see how this ends. They blazed around the corner as the shouts of the enforcers turned to gunfire. Violina knew she didn't have many options. Into the casino! They'd be mad to open fire with so many people around. They burst inside and pushed their way through the crowds. Checking behind her, Violina saw her pursuers had entered, but were hindered by the swarms of people blocking their path. Upon reaching the back room, Lux called to the bartender, "Where is the back door?" The bartender took a long, suspicious look at her.
We don't have a back door.
Then where would you like one? Demanded Violina, holding up her charged hydraulic hammer. The bartender had no chance to respond before the blast sent debris rocketing in all directions. The already panicked crowd launched into pure hysteria. The girls darted through the newly created exit into an alleyway, but as they turned the corner, the inexplicable happened. A circle of light emerged from thin air, and a bright field bathed in sunlight floated just above the street. Had Violina gone mad? It was nighttime all around except for this out-of-place, physics-defying phenomenon. Was it some sort of mirage? Her thoughts were interrupted by Lux, who dashed past her and into the field. With no time to consider how bizarre or dangerous this was, she leapt through after her, the night disappearing around them.